trailers, it's Brad here at Etrailer, and today we're taking a look and installing the Curt Class 1 trailer hitch on a 2020 Toyota Corolla. So this is what our hitch is going to look like once it's installed. And you'll see right away, this is 1.25 inches, and this is a smaller size than your normal hitch. Now on many sedans and small vehicles such as this, including my own personal car, sometimes you're limited to 1.25 inches, which isn't the end of the world. You will just need to make sure when you're picking accessories that you get the shank that's going to fit that size. What is it capable of? Well, this is going to allow you to be able to put some bike racks as well as cargo carriers on here, and that's going to open up what you can actually do with the vehicle and give you a little bit of extra real estate. So it is nice to have, and I use mine for my bike rack all the time. So as long as you get a matching bike rack for the 1.25 inches, it does a great job. Now as far as towing, that's something that you might want to stray away from, being that it is a Class 1. It does have rolled style safety chain loops here, which is going to be fine for normal hooks, but the weight rating on this is going to be a gross trailer weight rating of 2,000 pounds. And that's going to be the weight of the trailer plus the accessories loaded up. Now you also have a tongue weight rating of 200 pounds, which is the downward pressure on the inside of the receiver tube opening. So those bike racks and cargo carriers, as they're suspended, you don't want to exceed over 200 pounds. Now you might be able to tow a small kayak trailer or something along those lines, or just a small little tow dolly to be able to pick up just a few things around at the hardware store, whether it be some dirt or gravel or whatever it may be. But again, this is not really something that you want to put a ton of weight on. But again, you do have these safety chain loops that are going to allow you to put a normal size hook or even a larger clevis style on here pretty easily. Now taking a close look, you're also going to see a 1/2 inch hitch pin hole, and this is going to be for your pin and clip to go through to keep your accessories in place. Now it doesn't come with one, but generally a lot of your accessories that you would pick up will come with one, and if you want to actually upgrade to a locking version, we have plenty of those available here at Etrailer, and that way when you have your accessories on here, you know that it's locked and it's not going to leave in the hands of someone else. Now we're going to take a few measurements here from the center of the hitch pin hole to the furthest point of the rear fascia. We're looking at about 2.5 inches, and that's important to note for your folding accessories, just to make sure that you're not going to make any contact with your rear fascia, causing damage to it in the process. Another thing we're going to measure is going to be our ground clearance. So from the top of the receiver tube opening to the ground, we're looking at about 9.5 inches. And while I don't really worry about this making contact with the ground, when you do have those accessories loaded up, as you go up inclines or go in some rough terrains, sometimes they can make contact with the ground. So I do recommend when looking for accessories to have something with a raised shank to maybe prevent any damage from occurring, but also just comes down to being aware when you have your accessories loaded up and when you're going up the hills, you just don't want to make contact with the ground and damage them. The install of this hitch, I will admit, is a little bit of a tricky one. And part of that is the instructions aren't exactly clear on some of these steps that you should do, but I actually found ways to help you along. So I do recommend watching the install all the way through before actually starting the installation. Toyota also didn't really do us any favors as far as mounting spots for the hitch, so you are going to be drilling into your frame rail, but I'm going to be here every step of the way to make sure that you can get it installed. So let's take a look at that now. We're going to begin our installation by lowering down our muffler. But before we do that, we want to actually support it. So if you're doing this in your garage or on your driveway, I suggest getting a block of wood or something to support this, because once we take it off the isolators, that exhaust is going to hang down and we don't want to cause any damage further upstream by just it hanging. So what I'm going to use is a cam buckle strap. I'm just going to go across my suspension here just to create a cradle. So anything that really holds this exhaust from dropping all the way down. So there's going to be a total of 3 rubber isolators that we're going to need to pry off the muffler to allow it to drop. We have one here. There's going to be one back here. And then we also have a center one that we're going to remove as well. And that should allow this to drop. So a little helpful tip. Sometimes these can be a little bit tricky. The rubber kind of dries up and it'll fuse a little bit to the metal. So to kind of help it along, I'm going to just use a little bit of penetrating oil here. You can either use a soapy water mix, and that should also help kind of move it along. And once you have that soaked, what you're going to do is grab a pry bar, and you're going to try to find a nice spot to where we're able to pry this back and off. And these are pretty strong, so if it is kind of pulling, don't worry too much. And they're pretty tough to rip, so whatever works best for you as far as leverage to kind of get this off. So now we're going to need to remove our heat shield so that we can trim it in order for the hitch to go up. And the way we're going to do that, there's going to be 3 10mm nuts. So let's go ahead and get those removed. Make sure you hold on to your hardware in a nice organized spot. It's going to make reinstallation of everything quite a bit easier. So now let's take this and we're going to be doing some trimming on it. You can use a pair of tin snips, or if you have a Dremel, you can use that as well. Just be careful because this can get pretty sharp, especially if there's burrs along here. Now in the instruction manual, they say to do 3 inch by 7, and that's what we have marked here. Looking ahead and kind of seeing the rest of the installation, I am kind of thinking we'd be better off to trim a little bit more. And the picture is a little bit tricky in the instruction manual as they actually have it down here, but this is obviously longer than 7 inches. So we're gonna go with the longer one here. So go ahead, snip this out. Again, just take your time here. It can get pretty sharp, so you don't wanna cut your hands on this. Got it. So we can set aside our trimmed heat shield, and we're gonna need to take down this underbody panel. It's gonna be pretty easy. There's gonna be some plastic push pins along the bottom here, and you're gonna want to make sure that you hold on to these as we go along. There's also going to be these plastic nuts here, and they kind of just, they're pretty easy to do with your hand, and a lot of times they'll just slide down off the stud. But if you wanna take them off with a socket, a 13mm is gonna do the trick. So I'm gonna go ahead and get these popped off, and we're gonna pull off this underbody panel. Now these are kind of tricky at times, especially if they have some dirt or buildup in them. The best way, you're gonna see there's 4 slots to allow you to put a flathead screwdriver in there and just kind of wedge it in. A quick little twist should pop it. And once you get that center portion to pop out, you should be able to get the rest of it out pretty easily. Now I do have a tool that makes this a little bit easier, and it's actually available here at Etrailer, and we'll be able to pry these out using that tool. The trim panel removal tool here is really nice when working with these. It prevents these from breaking, which over time, it's pretty common for these to break. So using this tool is gonna allow us to kind of get underneath it without chipping off edges. And then once you have this center section out, a lot of times you can reach under the whole thing and it should pry out. These ones are giving me a little trouble here, but we got that out and we'll continue along with the rest of them. Now there's also going to be kind of an odd one that's tucked here up on the driver's side. This you can actually probably spin with your hands, or it's got a slot here. If you have a wide flathead screwdriver, you can put it in there if it is tight, but this should thread off pretty simple here. Sometimes they do kind of get hung up on those studs as well, so pulling it a little bit might help kind of move it, but we're just about there. Once you have everything removed, we can actually take the underbody panel out. Now be careful, a lot of times rocks, dust, and dirt and debris will accumulate, so make sure you have safety glasses and kind of stay away from the path of where this will fall out. But this should come out here pretty easy. There's a tab that's kind of hung up there. Looking at the instruction manual, they have you cut a slot that is going to be 2 inches wide by 11 1/4. So I've actually used painter's tape, and kind of gives you a nice clean line to follow. So let's go ahead and get this trimmed out. And then once that's trimmed out, we'll go back with a file, just kind of clean up those edges. So now we have this underbody panel nice and cut and clean. We're gonna set this aside. We need to prepare the area where we're actually gonna put our hardware in place. And there's gonna be rubber plugs here on the frame rail. You can actually go ahead and take this one out. There's gonna be one on the other side as well. And these can be a little tricky to get out as well, just using your fingernails. So just you can pry it with either a scraper or a flathead screwdriver. And speaking of scraper, we have some caulk from the factory that they put on the seams. We're gonna need to actually scrape this away. You can use a flat knife, a butter knife, something along those lines, or a scraper to get a nice clean surface. And so you're gonna want this to be flush. So we'll go ahead, get this all scraped off. You're also gonna have it on the other side, so go ahead and repeat that once you're done on this. Sometimes going ahead and making a few cuts and kind of digging under it, you can pull it off in one big piece, and that's gonna make it a lot easier. With an extra set of hands, we're gonna put our hitch up in place, and that's gonna give us the spot where we actually need to drill for our hole that's gonna be further up. So what we're gonna do, the plastic plugs that we took out, you're gonna line this up, and then on the back with a paint marker or a pen, something along those lines, we're gonna go ahead and mark where the other hole is. And so just kind of align that there, and I'm just gonna go ahead and make my mark right here. I'm gonna do that on the other side of the vehicle as well. So now we're going to need to drill a pilot hole first here. So I just have a small drill bit, and I'm just gonna center it up here and make a first drill mark. Now we are gonna have to enlarge this to a 1-inch hole, and there's a few different ways you can do that. You can use a larger drill bit to widen this out and put a die grinder bit in there and kind of work that circle, or to make it a little bit easier, you can actually use a hole saw with a 1-inch blade on it, or even a step bit. Just mark where that 1 inch is and only go that far. Either way, you're gonna want to have a nice round circle there just to make it a little bit easy for you. So I'm gonna go ahead and use my hole saw here, and I'll get those holes made on both sides. Now while you're drilling, if you're wondering how large you really need to make it, basically you want to make sure that you can get your spacer in place. So as long as it is wide enough for this to feed in, that's going to help out. Now before we do anything else, we're going to want to make sure we file down some of these edges, get some of those burrs out. And then once we have this all actually nice and smoothed out, we're going to go ahead and just put a little bit of spray paint. I'm just using a clear gloss clear coat, and that should just be fine to coat this raw metal, prevent any rust from happening. If you have black, it really doesn't matter. As long as we coat this up, that's going to make sure that it protects that raw metal. We need to get our hardware, and we're going to get this in place, and what it's going to do is have 2 studs here to where our hitch can actually raise up, and the way that we're going to accomplish that is using a fish wire technique. So you'll have this coiled little wire in your kit. You're also going to want to grab a carriage bolt and a spacer block. And so we're going to do this one first. That way we can get this one in place. This one should be pretty easy. But what you're going to do is take the coiled end, and you are going to just feed it over to that hole that you made. And if you want to, you can put a little bend on this so it doesn't pull through, but you got plenty of wire, so it shouldn't be too big of a problem. You then just take your spacer block. You can slide that up in there, and then you're going to just thread this on to that coiled section. And then you'll feed this in. With a little jostling, this should drop down just like that. Now leave the wire on. It's going to make it a lot easier when we actually put the hitch up and install it. So now this one's going to be a little bit easier here. What I'm going to do is take my spacer block, and I can just feed that like that with the coil. Take your carriage bolt, thread this on. Then we just feed these up into the frame rail here. And then go ahead and pull that down. Again, you're going to want to leave the wire here, and we're going to go ahead and repeat the same process that we just did here on the other side. So now go ahead and grab your trimmed heat shield, and we're going to put this back in place. Now one of the mounting holes has been actually removed in the process of trimming it, so you're going to have an extra nut, but the other 2, we're going to just use those existing ones that came with it. So now with an extra set of hands, we're going to actually raise our hitch in place. Now it might help to raise it over the muffler first, just for clearance issues. And as we feed the hitch up, what we're going to do is take the corresponding fish wires and feed them through the holes. And you can pull those, And what helps sometimes is I just grab the wires down here and pull as I work my way up until those studs are popping through. So once you have those through, what you're gonna do is remove one of the fish wires. You can just pull it, and careful, sometimes they can pop and catch your knuckles, but once that's off, the main thing you wanna do is hold to make sure that this isn't going to push back up in the frame, otherwise you're gonna have a rough time getting that back out. So I'm actually sliding the hitch forward to kind of put some pressure on it, and that's gonna allow me to just go ahead and hand tighten one of our nuts on here. And once we have one on each side, that's just gonna hold that hitch in place to make it a lot easier. So now we're just gonna go ahead and do the same process on the remaining hardware, just making sure we have these just hand tightened on for now. If you need to, just kind of hold that with your thumb. Again, try not to push that back up in the frame rail. Just putting these back on. You can generally, if you sprayed them with the penetrating oil, they should just kind of pop back into place, but make sure that you get all three. Before tightening the hitch up, when you just have it hand tighten, kind of leave that loose to give you a little bit more access in order to feed that underbody panel up. And now that we have everything put back in, like our plastic push pins, we've tightened down those plastic nuts. We're gonna go back and tighten them. Now you can see it's gonna be accessible because of this slot. And something else that I noticed, this will actually kind of cause a little bit of issue here because we trimmed it and it was still tight against the hitch. So if that's the case, as you're putting it up, I would take a utility knife and just kind of run along here and peel back as much as you need to make sure that it has clearance to sit flush. And that was a look and installation of the Curt Class 1 trailer hitch on a 2020 Toyota Corolla.